So I will share my screen. And I will present the work, the initial advances that we have in order to see how we can improve this coordination between ocean observing activities. So do you see my screen? Yeah. Yes, okay. Great. So my presentation is entitled Ocean Integration, How Can We Improve Coordination Between Ocean Observing Activities? And so I will go in, my presentation consists in 4 parts. So first I will explain what does it mean? What does ocean integration means? What do we expect? Why do we need this coordination? Then in the second part, why do we really need, why it is absolutely needed to improve this coordination right now? And then I will explain the barriers and solutions based on different examples from different fields. And finally, I will go through the proposal for specific actions. So first, what does ocean integration means? Well, integrated science in general refers to the process of combining multiple disciplines together. So it is synonym of interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary science. And actually, it is sometimes used as synonyms, but they are not synonyms, and they are actually a subtle difference with multidisciplinary. And I think it is important to understand because it really explains what does integration means and what do we expect for the future. So a multidisciplinary approach will be an additive approach. Each discipline persists in its own way of working, and then you want to combine them at the very end of the process. Whereas an interdisciplinary process is more an interactive approach where you synthesize knowledge and methods from multiple disciplines. You see that in the image, the cycles slightly overlaps each other. And then finally, what would be the highest degree of integration will be a transdisciplinary approach when all cycles form just one cycle. It's a complete holistic approach. It produced a new novel form or way of working that is beyond the reach of individual disciplines. And so what about ocean integration? When in the ocean, we know that it is a very complex system, so we need to combine multiple disciplines. So of course, we need to do more transdisciplinary, but we also need to combine multiple in-situ platforms, buoys, moorings, gliders, ships, etc. So inside each disciplines, we also need to combine multiple expertise together. And also we need remote platforms, satellites, radar, and we also need numerical models. So ocean integration could be defined as the process to optimally coordinate, combine all these elements together so they are shaped to each other and form a coherent whole. And when I say a coherent whole, I mean that they represent the best, in the best way possible, the oceanic processes including all the different aspects. When we use the word integration in general, I think we refer to vertical integration because I think we can divide in 2 components. There are vertical integration and horizontal integration. And this, I can explain it based on the value chain approach. On the figure here on the left, you have the value chain of the ocean observing system with at the base, the science and societal needs. And then the second step is the scientific approach and design, then the data acquisition modeling, data management, products and services, and finally the science and societal benefits. And so the vertical integration would be the integration that occurs along the value chain. It is the process to coordinate the different stages of one single data coming from one single platform. So this is what is used for Argo, satellites, gliders, etc. And there are a lot of work that is being done at the moment to improve this integration along this value chain. And the goal is to ensure that the final data is fit for purpose. But what is also very important is the horizontal integration, which occurs at the same value level. It's the process to create synergies between partners in order to elaborate products that combine multiple data from multiple disciplines and multiple platforms, and to ensure that the data is fit for multiple purposes. So now I come to my second part, would be why do we absolutely need ocean integration? Well, at the moment, we face many issues that are restricting our ability to advance faster in ocean science and in ocean observing in general. Here, I have listed the most important things that you can find in the many reports in the last 5 years. And basically, it's the fact that you have gaps in ocean observing coverage. So there are important processes that are insufficiently measured. Observing networks only are partially adequate for addressing the new scientific challenges. And in particular, they do not resolve multiple spatiotemporal scales. The second problem is that there is insufficient sharing. Lots of observations are not fair. Most observations cannot be used to their full extent, and this made a lot of difficulties in implementing data assimilation and model verification, for example. And finally, we have a duplication of effort because there is little communication between teams, institutions, and nations, and most observations are not fit for multiple purposes. So that means that in general, when an observation is made, is by one team for one specific purpose. And even if some other people, other teams, or the science teams would benefit from these observations, because they don't communicate together, they can't use these observations because this observation is not fit for outside of its original context. And this leads to a non-optimum use of resources. So to summarize, basically, the problem is that all the data do not exist, or the data exist, but they are not available, or the data exist, but they are not fit for use. And the second reason why we really need ocean integration is because today we have a strong societal expectations. And ocean integration is essential if we want to commensurate with the ambition of the UN Decade of Ocean Science, and also to create a real digital twin of the ocean. So now I will go through different examples of integration in different fields to explain what are the barriers to cooperation, collaboration, and integration. And then what are the solutions they propose and how this can be applied at the end of this presentation, we will see how this can be applied for the ocean observing system. So as I said at the beginning, integration in general means in science transdisciplinary. And I found a lot of literature on the subject on the obstacles to transdisciplinary research. And basically, there are 3 main obstacles according to this literature. So there are interpersonal and organizational barriers, the fact that it is difficult to communicate with different disciplines, the lack of clarity regarding the goals and definition of integration. So this is very important to everybody agree on what do we mean by integration, because there are very different degrees of integration. So it's very important to agree on the definition. The fact that in general, participants in a project have different objectives, so they don't work toward a common objective. And also because there is a lack of ownership in the project's integration phase. So the fact that everybody agrees that integration is important, but nobody knows who is in charge of doing this integration phase. The second problem is time demands and external barriers, the fact that it is very time dependent. So integration really takes a lot of times. And in general, we don't have these necessary resources. And the third problem is linked to academic traditions and epistemological barriers. So the fact that it is difficult to copy with different academic traditions, and the tendency for limited trust in other knowledge domains. And finally, and last but not least, the academic merit system. And I will go more in details about this last thing, because there are many reports on this subject. In particular, there is this report of the OECD in 2020, which it is entitled Addressing Societal Challenges Using Transdisciplinary Research. And they really say that the main obstacles to transdisciplinary research are embedded in the traditional disciplinary structures, norms, and practices of our science system. And the major barriers are the silos of expertise, the disciplinary-oriented structures, and the academic merit system. And why? Well, there are also a lot of literature on the subject that say that the way research is assessed at the moment, the way the research metrics are designed, they tend to prioritize progress in narrow specialized fields. Why? Because we are only assessed in terms of quantity of publications, and this encourages quantity over quality. So there is a shift towards more mainstream and less risky research. Also because the societal relevance is undervalued, whereas this is the the first objective of a transdisciplinary research will be the societal relevance, the societal needs. Also because the long-term goals are undervalued and because the coordination and communication are undervalued. And this is very important in transdisciplinary. You need time to coordinate and communicate. So these tend to reinforce the silos between disciplines. So in all this literature, what they say that would be the solutions to foster integrative research at the academic system level is to introduce more thematic-based or challenge-based approaches, and in particular to create more transversal cross-department structures. So instead of being divided in vertical discipline departments, to be divided in another departmentalizations. Also, the main thing they say is that we need to change the peer review, evaluation, and promotion criteria, because they are all organized in disciplines. And in particular, we need a reform of the research assessment system. And this is something that is in progress since the Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA, in 2012. And in particular, last year, there had been this report in Europe towards a reform of the research assessment system. And this is something that is underway. There is a coalition for advancing research assessment that is being created at the moment. You can see on the website COARA. We can chat on this more after my presentation. And basically what they say is that the scientific excellence definition should be broader. We should not be only assessed in terms of publications, but we should be assessed also in terms, I mean, all the scientific excellence should include the full range of research outputs, so not just publication, but data, software, best practices development, etc. Also, the diversity in all research activities should be valued. So, for example, training, which is very important, teaching, very important also, and team science and collaboration should be more valued. And last but not least, the contribution to the overall research system. So that means that we should be less assessed in terms of individual performance, but instead we should be assessed more in terms of collective performance. So this would help for scientists to be more engaged in collaborative processes if they are valued. And finally, concerning this transdisciplinary research area, the solutions to foster integrative research at the project level, I found a very interesting paper from Tress et al. In 2006, where they say the 10 steps to success in integrative research projects. And the main thing that I think that are interesting is that they say that you have to make integration an integral part of a project, because it doesn't appear by magic. You really need to consider it as an integral part of the work. You need to define a common research question, very important. Everybody has to work toward a common goal. You need to develop an integration implementation plan to be sure that everybody knows who is in charge of doing the integration process, etc. You need some leadership. It's easier when some people have leadership and with high-level interpersonal skills. And finally, you need to choose a more integrative project design. So instead of having a parallel project design, as on the left side of this figure, having more an integrative project where you see that everybody is working together at the beginning, then you have subgroups working together, but at the end, they all work toward the common goal from the beginning. Instead of doing work in parallel, and then at the end, trying to combine the different elements. The second example that where I found some interesting things about integration is in business management. And I will go just for one slide because it's not, it's very different than science, but I think it's very interesting because it's a common matter in business, the matter of organizational silos. Because when you have a company, it's very usual then departments tend to work by themselves, I mean, alone, without communication. And this is very difficult. This is not very useful for the company to be productive. And so you have a lot of literature on this subject in business management of why does silo exist and what are the common solutions that could be implemented in order to break down these silos. And what they say is that silos exist because you have internal competition, because you have departments that are competing between against each other, because you have a lack of communication, and because there is a loss of focus of overall company goals. And the common solutions that are claimed in this literature are to define a common goal, to have strong leadership, to have high-level interpersonal skills, to remove the internal competitiveness, and to redesign the organizational structure. And so why I'm saying this is that I think it is interesting to see that actually the solutions are quite similar to what you found in transdisciplinary research. And last example that I think is very relevant for our case in ocean observing is integration for managing the world's natural resources. In this area, integrated approach means a coordinated management for sustainability. So the goal is to ensure that the resource is used responsibly, effectively, and equitably. So the various examples we have is the integrated water resource management, the integrated coastal zone management, the integrated forest management, and also the management of marine protected areas. And in this context, integrations means to take into account many aspects. You need to take into account different knowledge and expertise, but also you integrate all the ecosystem levels. So you integrate all the process in one ecosystem. You are thinking on ecosystem level. You also make social integration because you take into account the use and the needs of the population that are living in these areas. Also, you do economic integration because you need to integrate the economic aspects in this management. You also do stakeholder integration because you need to take into account all the actors that are having needs for this resource or are exploiting this resource. And you also do spatial integration because you are working at the watershed scale. And so how do they manage to how do they do to manage the resource responsibly, effectively, and equitably? So there are basically two models of management, which is the top-down management and the community-based management. The top-down management is the very, we all know what it means, but I want here to really make clear the difference between the two types of management. So the top-down management, it requires a central authority and strong leaderships. And the advantage is that it sets clear goals and guide implementations. And in general, there is a good alignment with international priorities. But the disadvantage is that the rules are not congruent with local conditions. In general, there is a disconnection between what is implemented at the top high level and with the local conditions. And also the other problem is that it's very dictatorial and the users are less engaged in the process because they don't know why they are imposing this kind of management. Instead, you have the community-based management where you can think that it's a little bit more complicated, but actually there are many examples in the world that are really working and where community are able to manage themselves and to organize themselves to manage a common resource. But it requires users to agree on goals and implementations and users to agree on rules, moral, and ethical standards. And the advantage is that there is more ability to bring together diverse knowledge and everyone feels part of the process, so is more engaged. And the disadvantage could be that it can slow down processes because everybody has a say, and so everybody has to agree, and so it can take time. And the other problem is the issue of ego, is that if everyone wants to be heard, then sometimes people can be more interested in their self-interest instead of the overall goal. But one of the big defenders of this community-based management approach is Elinor Ostrom, and she was the first woman who gained the Nobel Prize of Economic Science in 2009. And she gained the Nobel Prize because she demonstrated that it was feasible to manage common resources without government or private control. She is a strong defender of this kind of management, and she really believes that this is something that should be implemented instead of always thinking about top-down approach. But when you look at the literature on the integrated coastal zone management or integrated water resource management, in general, what the literature is saying is that the best way would be to combine both approach, because the best way would be to encompass both the top-down planning, so you can have a long-term vision, and the bottom-up approach, so you can have more. Everybody is able to share knowledge, and everyone feels part of the process, and it's at the end it's more effective. And finally, my last slide before I come to the conclusion on how we can apply this on the ocean observing system is there have been some examples in the history of organizations that actually in some way encompass both top-down planning and bottom-up learning, is the collective impact organizations. And this has been described for the first time by sociologists Kanya and Kramer in 2011. And they say that collective impact organization is reached when a core group of community leaders decide to abandon their individual agendas in favor of a collective approach. And this has been working for solving complex social problems, such as reforming public education or restoring wetland environments. And in general, this kind of organization is very useful when the problems are too complex for one single entity to be able to accomplish it alone. And this kind of organization has been put forward in the context of ocean observations by a paper from Weller et al. In 2011 for the creation of an ocean partnership for sustained observation. So the fact that we could, the science community could make partnership with non-profit philanthropic organization, US federal agency, because it was a US case, and private sector in order to have sustainable ocean observations. And the 5 conditions to have collective impact are shown here in this figure is that you need to have a common agenda, so everybody agree on a common agenda. You need to have a shared measurement system, so everybody agree on how the progress will be measured and communicate to each other. You need to have mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and finally, a backbone support organization. So this is very important. You need to have an organization that is in charge of doing the coordination process. And it is not an organization that is in charge of imposing things. It's not a top-down approach, but it's an organization that is in charge of the long-term vision, of the long-term planning, of all the activities that you need in order to create this cross-sector coordination. And finally, I think it is very important to say, and I don't understand why they haven't put this in this, they haven't put 6 conditions, because this is something they explain in their paper, is that something that is very important also is that you need funders to support the long-term collective process. And so that means that you need funders to be convinced that instead of supporting one single entity that will make an innovative technical solutions to solve the problems, you need to convince the funders that they need to support the long-term collective process. So they need to fund times and all the process that it has to be created in order for this cross-sector coordination to occur. So what about ocean integration? So in the case of ocean observing, all that I've been saying from the beginning can be applied. I mean, it is true that in ocean observing, we also have organizational silos. And because of what? Because we are a research-based system that is driven by discovery and understanding. So we don't have a mission-based, every teams and institutions can have their own priorities, and we are not obliged to align. Because we have unpredictable short-term research-based funding, so we can't have a long-term vision. Because we are organized in disciplines and platforms, so we are really the vertical departmentalizations. We have a disparate landscape with fragmented governance, with weak leadership, so we don't have a top-down government that allows to guide implementation and guide priorities. And we are also competing, every disciplines and platforms are competing against each other for funds. So this tends to this parallel design. We tend to work by ourselves and then to try to combine the things at the very end of the process. So how our ocean integration could be achieved? Well, with other 40 co-authors, we have come to the conclusions that we could achieve more ocean integration by these 3 main ideas. First, we could build a collective impact organizations. That means that all the actors of the ocean observing system could agree on a common agenda and values. And we could design a hybrid governance structure, so encompassing the both top-down planning and bottom-up community-based management, and establishing a clear design and implementation plan. The second thing is that we should be able to reach sustainability. We need to find funding in order to be able to have a long-term vision. So that means that we need to elaborate long-term funding strategies, and we need to efficiently communicate the added value of integration, the fact that it is very important to have a coordinated organizations. And last but not least, we need to promote a culture shift, because it is something that is related to the culture also. So we need to facilitate the transition from research to operational, to connect the diverse communities, and to foster more fair data and open science practices. And finally, we need to reform the ocean research assessment system. So just to conclude, this challenge is very, very big, and it will only be possible if the whole community is convinced to collectively debate on how to proceed. And this is why we have published this paper, and this is just the first step. We proposed these actions, but now we really want the whole community to debate on this and to receive feedback on these proposed actions and to see how we could implement them, for example, regionally and then more internationally. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to discuss this. And if you have more feedback that you want to send us after this workshop, you can use this email address, this ocean.integration@socib.s. Thank you very much. So perhaps now what we can do is that we can, because we can have an open discussion. I can answer your questions, and then you can give me your feedback of what you think about these findings and everything you want to mention. And then Lucy will present her work.
We'll share her issues with you.
Yes. Reflections.
Adela, I had a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Because from your presentation, it seems like strong social skills are required to achieve such ocean integration strategy. And so do you think we should change the way we recruit people, like we should recruit other people with that gift? Or do you think we could train people internally for that?
Well, I guess train people would be very interesting, but I don't know if people have time and if they are interested. So recruiting more people on the social aspect, I think, would be very interesting. And it's not just human and resource departments, but human and resource with this philosophy of integration. Because human and resource department are generally made from people that have a business background, and so we are not. This is the big difference with the business industry, is that we are not, we are public institutions in general, and we are for the common goal, for the common goods. So this is not the same thing than a business management plan, and we are not also used to have managers that are the way the business management is done. So this is why it is tricky. But now I have found a lot of people in the social sciences that are in business management that are more and more aware about this kind of community lead enterprises, bottom-up approach company, etc. You have more and more companies that are organized this way, especially companies where you need very specialized engineers, or when you need specialized staff. There are more and more examples in the world of companies organized in a bottom-up approach. So I think it would be very interesting to recruit more people on this aspect, to at the level of the institutions, to improve this coordination and helping scientists, because scientists are, we have too much work already, I think.
So you have examples in the private world, but do you have examples on the public sector or scientific academia sector?
Example of what?
Of organization with a community-based approaches. dedicated to like environmental issues, public, matters?
Apart from the examples I gave, no, I would say that in ocean observing, we have both top-down institutions and bottom-up institutions. In France, for example, I know that the CNRS in most of the labs are organized in a team-based approach, but they lack the top-down planning, and we lack the top-down. This is exactly the example I gave: is that you don't have a good alignment with the international priorities, etc. But you have the good thing is that it is community-based management. And on the other hand, you can have some top-down institutional, like, I guess, Ifremer, where you have, is historically more top-down. And but in the public institution, I will think about more examples. It's true that it will be interesting. Yeah. Maria, you want to say something?
It's more of a question. Thank you very much for this presentation. My question is, you mentioned a lot also the culture we have in academia and the metrics we're using for for career development or for like showing our value. And I think it's funny because now more and more funding programs on research-wise, they're asking about interdisciplinary approaches and stuff like that, but still fundamentally science is still very isolated and competitive and don't share things until they're published because it's been misused of data, and like some good behaviors have been misused traditionally, and people are afraid of being more open on that. And my experience is that there are some people that are trying to break that norm, but it's a tiny fraction of our community. And I don't know how we can really go through that barrier. Like from one hand, we have this top-down direction for interdisciplinary approaches. On the other hand, still, even on a funding level, even if they ask for that, they don't really mean that. So how do you think we can move forward with like the discussions you have from people that I guess are in their similar mindset?
Well, I think there is two approaches. First, it is true that it is a cultural shift. So this is maybe more problematic. And I think we can, because this is an international trend towards this reform for 10 years now, I think this is something that will be slow, but it is something that is making more and more sense for everyone. But and since for a year now in Europe in particular, you have this coalition for research assessment where institutions should be agree. You have an agreement that have been written, and hopefully institutions will agree. And this agreement, is not engaging. They are not obliged, but they agree to make some research on how to reform the research assessment system. And just to sign this agreement, it will take time, because I know there are a lot of people that maybe not everybody is convinced that this is the most important, but this is something that is on the trend. So maybe first we should train people for them to understand why this is so individualistic, and why we should have, because people are not, if you don't read the literature, you are not aware of this. People think that no, but collaboration, we need to collaborate for research, and so why is there a contradiction? But the second thing is that people, when you are assessing people in our systems now, you need metrics. And so people don't know how to assess collaboration. They don't know how to assess collective processes, communication, etc. And so this is something that also should be done, is how to develop new kind of metrics, because the only idea for the moment is to have more written CV, to have more instead of metrics, to have more text, instead of metrics. But because it takes more times, it takes people are afraid, because there will be maybe less, it will be less neutral, because metrics, it has it looks like it's neutral. And so the first thing will be to research, to make really strong research on how we could measure the collaboration in different way we are doing now, communication. But it's not something that is so difficult, because, for example, the example that comes to my mind that is, I think, the most important is that we should be able to value our contribution to the overall ocean observing system. For example, as scientists, what is my contribution to the ocean observing system? And this is not something that is being done now, because it's very individualistic. So we arrive to the first point, which is a cultural shift and training, etc. But also, I think it is important to develop new kind of metrics, new kind of protocols, because we need protocols and that stuff. And convince funders, but I think this is something that it will take time, but we are on the good way. And also to involve more early career scientists, because we are now in the UN Decade of Ocean Science saying that we need to engage with the early career professionals, but early career professionals in general stop doing science because the research assessment system is doing this way. So they will be the first interested in competing for this research assessment to change. And so if we engage more in this process, in general, they don't think they have a say on this, but we should be able to change things more, to create an initiative, for example, or stuff like that.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to jump in here. I don't necessarily have a question. I really enjoyed your presentation. It's really interesting. I think it opens a lot of discussion points that I've had with colleagues. Like, it seems to be definitely something that people are conscious of, like there's a lot of chat in the office of like, how do we collaborate with, other, even within your own institute, how do we collaborate with other disciplines within my institute? Because I noticed, like, the chemistry department is literally physically blocked with a swipe card barrier, and I was like, I don't know anyone in there. And when you do meet someone, it's really nice to have a chat and like, I didn't know you were working on that. Like, I'd be interested in, what you do or helping in any way, or even they don't know some of the equipment that we even have out there, or that they can use data from our boys up here that I have in my background. So that's interesting that like even within an institute, you're having issues of trying to bridge those silos. And then some of the work that we do, we work a lot with, like I'm on Jericho S3, some of my colleagues are working on EuroC, and you're having all these great chats, but how do you even just bring it internally? I think that's a good place to start,
Yes. Yeah, I think you make a very good point. And this is actually what Lucy is going to talk in a few minutes. And I think, this was my idea after this work, is to, I was like, but even at SOCIB, we are only 40 people and we don't know how to do. Maybe try to investigate how to do at the local level and then to scale up.
Start small, work big.
Yeah, because internationally it will be very, very difficult. I think it's better to start locally. It's a very, very good point. Connor, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Anne. So just to, first of all, to get to advertise that environmental sciences is a cross-thematic discipline, and it's really sort of fallen to the wayside in recent years, but it's still there. And it's interesting because I'm an environmental scientist. That's my training.
I am too.
But you still end up as an environmental scientist as playing second fiddle to the mainstream scientists, as they call themselves. Yet you're the only one in the room, typically, who understands how everything links together. That's just me getting my little complaint in there on that. But on the other aspects here, that was a very interesting presentation. I really like to see the paper. I just concerned that there is a division here between the interdisciplinary work within an institution and, say, from the EMOGnet perspective, the interdisciplinary work that can be fostered by data sharing. And I just pick up what Christine was saying there. It was very interesting what you're saying about in the Marine Institute. I know where those rooms are, and but the Marine Institute itself does a fantastic job at data sharing and publishing data. So if you go to their catalogs, it's really good. They follow best practices. They also follow NOAA's practices as well as European practices. And we in EMODNet, or I in EMODNet, often refer my colleagues to look at what the Marine Institute's done because it's very, very good. Other European colleagues do have a great job there too. So it's important that we have, I would say, be consistent at a European level anyway, between on how we tackle things like data sharing and data publication, so that we are not creating hurdles to interdisciplinary actions. And I see that we do have a bit of fracturing across Europe on how data sharing happens from the different institutes. And one of the things that tends to be forgotten is that recently, since 2019, I think it is, all publicly funded data is supposed to be open data. And we're still not putting the right licenses to the data sets. And if it's open data with the right licenses to the data set, then you don't, and you're publishing it in a reasonable way, you're opening, anybody can take it and work with it. I think there's points that we should, that need to be made, and that they say, well, this is where we are with this. We don't need to worry about this anymore. Let's move on to how we can build on top of it. I don't know if that makes sense there.
Yes, of course. The data sharing is a very strong issue, and this is why I think the research assessment system could change, because I think one of the biggest barriers of why people doesn't share their data is because they want to publish first, and this is something that is happening at the local level here in Spain and etc. So this is something that is very important. I agree. There is some fragmented way of sharing data in Europe, and whereas at the top level it is something that is almost mandatory. So it should be something that is more done. So we have to do some work on this, but the research assessment system would very help, because if it is valued to share data, if all these aspects is valued, it will help people to do it, because also it requires sometimes technical skills for data to be shared, and they don't have time because they want to publish, etc. Maybe you want, I wanted to make a second point, but maybe you want to say something on this?
No, just to refer back to your presentation, we were talking about the leadership roles. Something like the data sharing and the requirements of data sharing fits into a leadership by task. There's a common task everybody has to follow.
Yeah.
They all have to do that. So it's like having a CEO or a director in a company telling people what they have to do. Yeah. We know what we have to do, and we all have to work towards that. That doesn't mean that you are limited in what you do in your own research or your own applications. You just know that this is something that has to be done as part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, but at the international level, the organization that should be in charge of doing this top-down management would be the UNESCO IOD, and the UNESCO IOD is not doing a top-down management. Is not doing the job of a strong. It doesn't have a strong leadership. So this is the problem: is that when you have a top-down management, the first requirement is to have strong leadership. For example, in the meteorological system, you have the WMO. WMO is strong, has a strong leadership, so it's working. The problem is that in ocean science, we don't have any organization that has strong leadership. But then the second point I wanted to make on your comment on data sharing, I think it is very important. But also, if we want to, this is the first step. I mean, actually, what we have at the moment would be the interdisciplinary science would be much more improved if we have more data sharing. But at the end, if we look at a long-term vision and we want to have a digital twin of the ocean, for example, we not just need to aggregate data at the very end. We need a joint early planning of the observations for them to be optimally combined at the end. Because sometimes you have data, but they are not, even at SOCIB, we have different teams that are working with different platforms, and at the end, data are not comparables because they were not early planning. And this is maybe something that I should say more I should emphasize this at the very beginning of my presentation. Its integration would mean to do joint early planning. It's at the very beginning of the value chain that we need coordination to be sure that data at the end are comparable and can be optimally combined to do environmental research. And this is something that is strongly complicated at the moment. As Lucy will certainly say, at the level of the institution in general, it's complicated to be sure that all the data your institution make are comparable and can be combined together. So maybe if there is no much question, you can.
Okay, I'll do. I may have a comment on data sharing from an under-resourced country perspective, like, because we've been talking about, you know, our European system, and but when it comes to poor countries, then sometimes the fair principles are challenging, and we need to consider also care principles and trust principles. So that might be another discussion for later.
No, it's true. It's true that that I forgot to say that because I think that the issue is so complicated that I prefer to focus on the European and American culture, because it was easier to focus on this. But of course, if you think there is other culture, and in Asia and Africa, there are all other problems then for doing more ocean integration that I didn't mention. Thank you, Lucy.
You're welcome. So let me share my screen now. I guess it's gonna. So this is a very humble presentation where I'm sharing my issues, my challenges with you guys. So this is not a masterclass. I don't claim that I've sorted out, but we'll see. So my presentation is about fostering integrative observation initiatives at the institutional level. My institution will be the case study, IFREMER. So as I said earlier, I'm Lucy Cocampo. I've been working at IFREMER for 3 years now, and my job is to coordinate ocean observing systems. So basically, I set up and participate in the governance of observation systems, from national, international research infrastructures to citizen science programs. IFREMER is a French National Institute for Ocean Science. We do have 1,500 people working there. I think we have almost like 600 of engineers and researchers. We operate 11 vessels, including 6 IFREMER ships. We have 1 manned submersible, 2 remotely operated vehicles, 2 autonomous underwater vehicles. The budget of IFREMER per year is about 200 million euros. And we approximately produce 500 scientific articles per year. If you want more information, please visit our website or our social media, as we're on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So IFREMER has metropolitan France sites and other sites around the world. We have basically 5 centers, 4 in metropolitan France and 1 in Pacific Ocean, and we have 19 affiliated coastal stations over the 3 oceans. And our organization is divided into 4 scientific departments: biological resources and environment, physical resource and seabed ecosystem, oceanography and ecosystem dynamics, and research infrastructure and information systems. So this is a snapshot of our organization table. So here you have the scientific department. I think you have here the scientific advisory department, and you have the fleet department. And here you have the regional notes, and here you have the supporting activities, quite in silos, right? Just as we've mentioned earlier. So my personal professional challenge here is to structure and strengthen IFREMER observation related structures and initiatives, and to promote and federate the participation of IFREMER teams in European and national projects aiming at the sustainability of IFREMER's observation system. So right now, as you can see, we don't have any decision-making body dedicated to the observation at the institution level, and we don't have any forum for discussion of observation at the institutional level. And yeah, but we're working on it, as observation can be seen as a meeting point between fundamental science, expertise, innovation, and also a meeting point where you can build international, national, and even local partnerships with society. It's also a meeting point for research activities, data science activities, and technological development. So for me, observation can be seen as a great opportunity for the Institute to think in an integrative way. So ocean observation is a great opportunity, but has also major challenges, such as we're heading toward a multi-source observation, like we have the traditional in-situ campaigns. We also have like remote campaigns, mobile assessment models. We tend to have a lot of variables to study the ocean, like 54 essential climate variables and more than 100 essential ocean variables. That's a lot of parameters to follow. We are heading toward a multi-scale observation, and I'm sure you know those kind of figures, you know, where you can go from very little spatial scales to huge one, and it's the same time-wise. And we tend to have a multi-actor observation. By that, I mean that now we have all those citizens science programs developing. We try to run observation with non-expert people, and that's challenging, but that's also a lot of fun. So we have those challenges, and those challenges were outlined by the European Commission in an initiative run in 2012 by the DG Marie. It was named Ocean Observation Sharing Responsibility. It was a huge survey towards all the marine institutions in Europe. And in the context of this survey, they set the scene. They said that the main problem driver is the split of responsibility between different departments at both national and European level, and I could say also at institution level. And they said that there was a lack of national sea basin global overview of what is being measured, what is going to be measured, and what should be measured. Means that each community, fishery, research, hydrography, etc., sets its own priorities and uses its own data sets and assets. And they were also stating that there are a number of research infrastructure consortia supported partly by European funding that coordinated different national contributions, but there is no coordination between those different consortia, between the infrastructures. So at local level, we were having internal consideration on a new way of thinking and practicing observation within IPMER and sometimes beyond. So we were really thinking about the observation for the next generation. This observation 2.0 would be resolutely innovative, going beyond the observing monitoring division. We wanted the observation, the new way of thinking for observation really connected to the community concern, like meaning the producers, the users, and sometimes both. And we wanted to have these cross-cutting initiatives to institute discipline, and we wanted the observation to be a tank of idea, a think tank for addressing the challenges it faces. So to do these internal considerations, we had a bit of a roadmap. And the first step was to document the situation. We produced an internal note, like a paper. Then we shared this paper with our directors, seeking for approval and political awareness at our institution level. Then step 3, we built a small group, a working group for internal brainstorming with people from very different backgrounds, working in different buildings and disciplines and departments and stuff. And then we tried to build a community of interest. Like we made this small report and we went to present this report to many lab meetings, groups meetings, informal meetings. Like we try to raise the awareness here. And then now we feel like we need to give that an impulse with a federative event. Maybe it's going to be like a web-based event, but we think like we need now, it's an energy inside this initiative. So basically what we present with this working group, this brainstorming working group, is the need for 2 kind of initiative, just as Adele said, like we need a top-down initiative internally for observation, like an observation and monitoring steering committee. But we also need like a community-based approach, like cross-cutting scientific and technological animation around observation. So for this one, I think we will invite like all the observation monitoring network managers, and we'll invite also representative of the directorates and programs. And the role of this entity would be to propose changes in monitoring and observation under the scientific guidance of IFREMER in a national and European context, to develop synergies between different networks and identify bottlenecks, skills, position at IFREMER level, and to move toward an interactive and coherent approach to observation with all the units and laboratories of the Institute. This is cooperation. And on the other side, with the bottom-up approach, we would like to invite everybody, all the employees at IFREMER that have work connected to observation monitoring activities, like network operators, researchers using observation, engineers, technicians, including the one from the data department. And the role of this bottom-up approach would be to create links and give a shape to a community of interest around observation to foster an agile and proactive approach to the observation challenges of tomorrow. And the role of this group will be also to know and make known what we do in the different IFREMER observation project, networks, departments, and to encourage then the emergence of ideas and projects to progress in the sharing of best practices. And that would be collaboration. I don't know if you are familiar with this distinction between cooperation and collaboration. What I learned from the literature is like cooperation builds functional bodies, you know, it provides guidance. And when you work in a cooperative way, you share objectives and you can work independently and dependently, you know, in this work packages kind of structure. And collaboration from literature is more like an ecosystemic approach, you know, pretty well disorganized, but we explore, we co-construct, we document initiatives. We don't share objectives, but share vision and values. And this is something interdependent. And there is a figure I like a lot. If the main goal was to build a forest, then in a cooperation approach, you will start building little part of the tree, you know, you will divide the work just to build one tree. And in a collaboration perspective, everybody will have the right to develop its own tree with different sizes, different, you know, forms and stuff. But that's another way to build a forest or to create one. So I think the bottom-up and the top-down approach are really relevant and needed for an institution. We need to have the two. If we only have cooperation, then we'll have this rational organization of the work that will also have those silos, these individualisms, this lack of connection between activities. And if we only have like collaboration, this cross-cutting animation, then we'll have a great think tank, but we're not sure we'll get any work done or produced. Like we'll have ideas and enthusiasm, but we need more. So if we try to combine the two, the ocean observing steering committee and the cross-cutting animation, then I'm sure we'll be able to address more questions and in a more creative and inclusive way. So we build those two. We're trying to build those two at IFREMER, and we really want those two bodies to interact, you know. From one way, the steering committee will benefit from the cross-cutting animation because this is a community that could document any subject you need to have a decision on. And we like this arrow as well, because sometimes, you know, the community knows that she needs some strong move from the directory, from the headquarters. So it's good to have a pass so the community can request for decisions, for vision, for long-term vision that is needed. Okay, we need the two. So how do we start? The next step for us, and it's happening like right now, it's been next month, is like we've been creating an animation committee, which means a board of scientific representatives with a secretary of the meeting I'm the secretary, and we try to build a community. So we sent an open invitation to all the observation-related personnel to try to identify the areas of interest, good subjects so we could meet. And we're building a web-based platform for data sharing. I think like the social web is very useful for us to create a community. And just as I mentioned, our next plan is to organize a big seminar. So I'll keep you posted with that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Lucy, for this presentation on how can we do this. It's really applied the principle that I presented at the beginning, but at the institutional level. Very interesting.
We didn't prepare a presentation together, but I saw your presentation and I was like, oh, yeah, we're aligned.
Did you have to convince a lot the directors, etc., that it was necessary for this approach, or do you think at the cultural level there everybody is aware about this need?
Yeah, we do have this cultural challenge, and I think it's a matter of generation. You know, like it can't be disturbing for the eldest generation, I guess, to change the way they used to work. But right now we're doing a proof of concept. So that's the way I presented it to my headquarters. I said, we'll try this as an experiment. And if it doesn't work, well, forget about it. So we'll see. But I get a lot of motivation from my colleagues. Like they really call for a change in our institution. So it's really good to work on that because, yeah, it feels like it's useful.
And I have a question about this, what you just said, is that, so it's an experiment and let's see I mean, if it works, but how the progress will be measured. Did you decide on what's the objective and the time frame and how the progress will be measured in order to assess the effectiveness of this approach?
Mm-hmm. KPI, good one. Thanks a lot for that. I was thinking about some KPIs, and then the situation worldwide changed. Like now we've got the COVID, now we're struggling with basic resources. So I really hope this kind of organization will make the demonstration that we can be more resilient, you know, toward crises. And yeah, I think crisis is challenging, but also an opportunity to see, hey, how about changing the way we're working? And hopefully it will be more efficient.
Yeah, I think it is important also, yeah, about the resilience of the lab. Conor, do you want to say something?
Yes, thanks, Lucy. That was a great presentation, and the points you're making are very needed. We need some sort of approach in Europe that we can share thinking. I was just wondering, are you aware of the Earth Science Information Partners organization in the US? Because to me, that's a fantastic. Obviously, it's aimed at the USA. We don't have something like that in Europe. We need it, I think, and that's funded by NOAA and NASA and USGS, and it's basically data managers getting together and talking about what needs to happen. And it struck me from your presentation there that there would be an overlap between the two, what you're planning to do in Inframar and what ESIP tries to do. So maybe you could turn Inframar's project into a European project.
Yeah. Well, tell me about it. I think right now European projects are very time consuming. They're not as efficient as they used to. So I like to start, little with a local project, but I like to think global too. So maybe I'm a global person combining local and global approaches. And you're true that there are really interesting initiatives in the US. You were mentioning the Earth Science Organization. I can also think of the sustainability centers that are been developing really interesting techniques. So if you have some references or contacts that you could share with me, I would be more than happy to contact them.
Sure. Well, I'll put the link to ESIP in the chat. Of course, they have the advantage that they're one country, which is
Yeah, and they've got a lot of money, right?
but we can learn from whatever work they do.
Of course, yeah.
Or-
They're good at facilitating things. You know, when you refer to the GAFAs, the whole idea is to make things simple, very simple. So I like
Yeah.
this way of thinking.
Yeah, thank you very much for the link. And it's true that a lot of time when we talk about integration and coordination, we do give these examples of the US and the Australian system that are more integrated. But of course, it's because the top-down approach is more effective because it's just one country and with one ministry, etc. In Europe, for example, many countries face the same problem, is that ocean management is divided in many different ministries in each country. And then when you try to combine the European level, then it's even more messy. But even inside one country, it's complicated. So of course, it's a lot more easier to have a top-down approach when it's just one country. But it's interesting to see that we are in different places in the world trying to find solutions on the same problems. So if there is no more question, I had prepared some question for you about maybe if you want to, I mean, because we are only 5, maybe we can do it I mean, face to face, but I had prepared a Miro board so you can type your impressions and with some questions. So I will share the link, and it's just 6 questions, and it's quite quick, and it's about your impression at your work level on the reason why we have problems in integration. So I will share the link in the chat. And so you will access a Miro board where you have the 6 question that I will tell you upload. And you can type in the sticky notes. You can type your impression, and it's anonymous, and you can give me your impressions on this subject. So the first question I had prepared is that, in your opinion, what are the principal barriers to collaboration between institutions, disciplines, platforms, and networks? Are they technical, organizational, political, financial, or cultural barriers? So you can use, you can type text in each of the sticky note, or to add one sticky note, or whatever you want. Or you can also express your, if you want to answer the question, you can also speak and with your microphone and tell me your impression. They can, I mean, there are different barriers, of course. We have been talking about all these different barriers, but perhaps there is one that is stronger in your institution, or you in your daily work feel that is the strongest. So thank you very much. Maybe we can move to the second question. So which aspects mentioned in this workshop do you consider the most important? What do you think really it's the most important thing, or the first step we should work on, etc.? Then the third question is about the research assessment system. I wanted to know if you are convinced that the reform of the research assessment system would strongly facilitate this ocean integration, and why. Are you convinced it is something that for you is absolutely clear, or for you maybe it's not the most important?
On that point, maybe I can share a small comment, personal comment. I was discussing with colleagues from NOAA, and I was telling them that the first thing that we need to do together is to build a new assessment system. And they were not convinced about that. So I thought that was an interesting differences, you know, between our European and their US perspective.
Okay. And then more on the topic of the proposition I made that we could build a collective impact organization in order to reach more ocean integration. So this collective impact organization is not necessarily at the international level. It could be polycentric and multi-level. It could be at the national, regional, and then international levels. But so what do you think would be the principal difficulties in building this ocean observing system as a collective impact organization? Do you think it's realistic, or if I remind you that it's the fact that you have to agree on a common agenda, to have a coordinated body, to decide on a shared measurement system, etc. So if you have any inputs on this idea.
Connor, since you're here and since we need to be data-centric, I was thinking about this Emodate portal and this Copernicus portal. There are two data portals for ocean data. Do you think they should merge, or do you think it's good to have two different portals because they address two different needs?
Interesting question. So one's funded by DG DEFIS, so one's funded by DG Mare. And we are actually working in the background of creating a data lake of data from both portals as in a way to support digital twin of the ocean projects. So yes, I do think it'd be great if you could unify them. I don't think you need to have actual portals as one central portal. If you have the data shared in an open way, which we trying very hard to do in EMODNet, and I know Mercator are trying very hard to do with the Copernicus program, you should be able to create a space where developers or other entities can start taking those data sets and unifying them in a way that suits their community. So I think we should revisit this next year when we have the data lake running. The data lake is going to be really exciting. Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
that's a technology.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the great example to me here is how Inframer shares the Argo data. So the Argo data is on the SERDAP server, so people can come and pick and choose the Argo data that suits their needs and put it on their SERDAP server or their portal.
Yeah.
Ideally, I'd love us to be in a situation where we can do that with all Copernicus and all SERDAP data, and all national data.
Yeah, I think Emodate was one of the first portals using AirDAP system, and that was a really good move. Thanks for that.
No, Marine Institute was. So I just get the plug in there for Christine.
Yeah, we use, I didn't know we were actually the first one, but yeah, we definitely try to have a major emphasis on pushing all of our data onto the AirDAP.
I think SOSIP is using it, and JRC is using it, and Inframer is using it, and the Chinese have started using it too. And that is not a top-down thing. That was data managers talking to each other.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was a great move because by the time you made that decision, like AirDAP technology was just emerging, and you say, okay, let's go on that one. Let's give it a try. And now it's
so I mean, a lot of situations from people I've talked to is they've been given data managers or IT professionals, data professionals were given a task to do, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to build some portal or build something. And then they realize that putting something like AirDAP in the background, I mean, there's other solutions too, but putting something like AirDAP in the background achieved a lot of the technical tasks they needed to do in order to fulfill this other high level task.
Yeah.
And then they just left it there. So, yeah, and this is what, from your presentation there, one thing I saw that was missing at the high level was the data managers. The people who are aware of the technology change that's happening.
Yeah, I will add them for the next session of this workshop. We have another session this afternoon, so I'll get an opportunity to correct my slides. Thank you, Connor.
At the digital twin level in Europe, we have two philosophies of thought. One is the federated idea of a federated data lake, which is basically what we have at the moment in theory. Whereas what's actually happening in temporary ICT are data lakes where copies of data are being centralized in these high-speed access storage facilities. So it's important to have people who are aware of the current developments in IT and data management at the policy level or at the decision-making level, in order to avoid waste, I would say.
Well, great. Well, thank you for your inputs. The last two questions I had prepared was if you have something, if you have an idea and you want to add something, It was the fifth question. It was, to your knowledge, what is currently being done to address the issues we are addressing? Just if you have something you want to mention, projects or initiatives or etc. And finally, if there are other aspects not already mentioned and you really you want to consider, you think it's important to consider and you want to mention them. But if you don't have any inputs on this, that's okay.
Sorry, just to bring in here, Lucy, I didn't mention it here because because I'm working on it all the time. We're centralizing eModNet. We're getting rid of all the portals. There's going to be one portal, and it'll be all launched in January.
They have seen.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one part of that is that we standardized each of the thematic groupings on standard technologies. They're using the same metadata catalogs. They're using similar data sharing policies. And this is a first step. But over time, we'll keep iterating that and keep iterating it. And the other idea is that we want our catalog to be harvestable, not just for metadata, but for data. So you create that situation where somebody can create an ad hoc catalog to suit their particular need, maybe aquaculture or wind farms or whatever, or ocean sciences. But it's to improve interoperability, improve data sharing of open data products.
Yeah.
It's
I
hard.
think you're doing a lot for data sharing within our community. And I really like your data ingestion philosophy, where anybody from citizen science program or very high level institution can just put data in your portal. So that's a good one.
Yeah, but as I said, it's hard. It's not something we do what we can.
But I would be really interested in a presentation of your organization, like the decision-making bodies within eModNet, because it sounds to me like a very dynamic and enthusiastic community.
Sure.
And I think one of the main difference between Copernicus and eModNet is the way, decision is made within those two portals.
It's a lot easier for Copernicus because they have a very top-down approach.
Yeah.
Whereas eModNet is a federation of communities, basically. And it's a very heterogeneous data. So Copernicus Marine, to give an example, the modeling data is very homogeneous. Whereas in eModNet, we've got biology and wind farms and chemistry and physics and all that type of stuff. We're trying to find ways to make that data available. In it, with at least, there's always going to be some sort of grinding of the gears, so to speak. We'll try and make it as easy as possible to share.
Well, thank you very much for your inputs and the answer of your questions. So it helps me to see if it's convincing or what would be the best way to implement this, etc. And also to be aware of what is being done, because I know that there are, we are now in an international context of being more cooperative, etc. So I know that there are a lot of initiatives, and as I said at the very beginning, integration is about also there are different degrees of integration. So everybody is trying to do integration at a certain level. So I believe there are a lot of initiatives. So thank you very much for your inputs. Thank you for your comments and everything for participating in this session. It was a very intimate session, as Lucy said at the beginning. It was very nice for me to meet you and to talk to you. Thank you. If you have any inputs or ideas, or if you want to share your advances on the subject or etc., please feel free to contact us, Lucy and I, in the future. We'll be happy to have your inputs. In the next steps, we want to work on this institutional aspect with Lucy. We really want to see how to perhaps to engaging more with business management experts on how we can improve the coordination I mean, this is an experience that Lucie is doing at Ifremer, and I really want to see how we can apply this at SOCIB and maybe improve it or etc. So this will be the work in the next future. And so if you want to join us in this work or whatever, feel free to contact us. Thank you very much for participating in this session, and happy to see you in the next step.
Really enjoyable, useful.
Thanks so much for all the presentations. Really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.